Hey everyone, welcome to the Dan and Joe Sports Show Bowl Pick'em Spectacular. We do this every year, and Joe and I always make it kind of interesting. There's no money on the line on this, but we have a lot of pride on the line and a mutual desire to not have to wear the colors and insignia of our favorite programs. Of our most hated programs. For Joe, that would be having to wear that gaudy maroon and white, which is so lame. There's only one cheer that only comes with it with that program, which is maroon and white. I never hear anything else at those football games except for cowbells. So Joe really doesn't want to have to wear any Mississippi State stuff. And meanwhile, I have two hated rivals. That's Alabama and Georgia. I'm in a constant battle in my mind for which one I hate worse. This year, I've decided that I hate Georgia worse. And so if Joe beats me in this year's bowl pick'em, then I will ask my friend of the show, Kyle, who is a tortured Georgia fan, to give me something Georgia, and I'll wear it on the show. And so, of course, we have a lot of impetus to want to win this. I'm the reigning champion. We've only done it 1 year, and last year Joe had to wear, I believe it was a Mississippi State ball cap, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what we've done is we've selected 25 games, which just so happened to coincide with another bowl pool that I'm involved in, and we're going to choose them just straight win or loss. And let's get going. All right, Joe, really exciting game, which I'm sure you are just at the edge of your seat in anticipation to watch. Western Michigan and Nevada. How could you possibly miss this one? Who do you have?
I'll go Western Michigan. Actually, I think one of our law school classmates was a Western Michigan football player.
That sounds right. Which one was that?
Oh, that was Matt Mills.
That's right. Matt Mills was, because he was really good at our flag football league. He always showed that ability. That's right, because he played with Antonio Brown, right?
Yes, they played a game against Central Michigan.
That's right. Well, yes. Joe's going to take Western Michigan. I'm taking Nevada on this for the sole reason of I feel like they've been a pretty consistent football program the last few years. And, of course, Colin Kaepernick played at Nevada. So that's really my only basis for that one. All right, Joe, we have East Carolina taking on Boston College. Who do you like in that one?
I'll go with Boston College. I've seen them more this year, and I saw East Carolina lose pretty bad to Cincinnati.
Yeah, and, Joe, Boston College did beat Missouri, which I know Missouri is not a great team. They're not what they were a couple of years ago with Pinkel, where they were in the SEC championship. But it's still an SEC program, and they won. And they started off the season, I think they were 4-0. So Boston College, is pretty good, and I think they're going to get this one done. So I also like Boston College in this game. All right, Joe, very interesting game. We want to talk about motivation. We talked about this guy a lot during our last show, and now we're talking Auburn taking on Houston in the Birmingham Bowl. Not exactly the most exciting bowl, but it is in the state of Alabama. The Birmingham Bowl is now in the new UAB Stadium, which is supposed to be pretty nice. And they're taking on what I think is a pretty fun team to take on. Of course, Houston won 11 games in a row. They were a very trendy pick to upset Cincinnati last weekend in the AAC championship game. And, of course, Cincinnati won. And so now Auburn's taking on an 11-2 Houston team, who, of course, is coached by Daniel Holgorsen, who really is doing a great job with that program. And Auburn, having lost 4 games in a row at a 6-6 record. Who do you got in this one, Joe?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you feel like, a lot of momentum's on the side of Cincinnati versus, Auburn. But at the end of the day, though, I didn't like what I saw out of Cincinnati against Cincinnati in the AAC championship game. And so I'm going to go with the SEC team to win this game with Auburn.
Yeah, Joe, if Houston had beaten, or gotten really close to beating Cincinnati, I think I would like Houston in this. And I also kind of think that some of the things that have happened lately are really going to inspire this Auburn team to play well in this. I mean, you got what they did on signing day, where they kind of came out of nowhere to have a pretty good signing class. It looks like Tank Bigsby is going to stay. I think that's a good thing that's going to unite some of the troops on this. Some of the last games for the seniors, like Roger McCreary, And some of the guys that are going to be, pretty high up in the draft is going to be Zacoby McClain, the Ricochet Rabbit, the great linebacker, is going to play in his last game. And I kind of think they want to end the season with a winning season for Harson's first year. I think there's a little bit more motivation on Auburn. I also got Auburn in this one. But tough one. Joe, the next one we have Air Force taking on Louisville.
Yeah, I'm going with Air Force. I know Louisville has a really good quarterback, but I've seen them play a couple times this year. Saw them play Ole Miss. I feel like they're kind of a one-man show, and Air Force always has like a tough offense to prepare for.
Yeah, I mean, Malik Cunningham's a very good quarterback, but you're right. There's just not a whole lot around him outside of that Louisville. They kind of disappointed me this year. I didn't expect them to be a great team by any means, but I kind of thought they could be a team that could win maybe 8 or 9 games and compete in the ACC, and they just never did that. And one thing I like, Joe, we talk about who's got the motivation in bowl games, who's opting out, who's not going to care. One thing about these service academies, their people don't opt out. Mm-hmm. Service academy men are driven. This might be their last football game ever, not just in college. I mean, so few of them or even have the ability to play in the NFL due to their service requirements that you always see a great effort out of service academies in bowl games. And I'll tell you the truth, Joe, I pick service academies off the bat on a bowl game unless it's like a ridiculous talent gap difference. So I also like Air Force in this game, who Air Force was really good this year. I think they won 8 or 9 games. They lost to Army and didn't get the Commanders Cup, but they were definitely better than Navy too. And so it was a good year for Air Force football. So I'm also taking Air Force on this one.
Okay.
Joe, the next one, I find this to be maybe one of the more fascinating games that I see on the board. NC State taking on UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, that really is a tough one. You feel like NC State's kind of kicking themselves, thinking they easily could have won maybe the ACC this year with it being just wide open, with Clemson not being as good. And then UCLA and Chip Kelly, they were kind of a trendy pick earlier in the season, and they kind of went downhill a little bit. I'm going to go with NC State because I just don't really trust the Pac-12 that much as a conference right now. And so I'm going NC State.
Okay. Well, Joe, NC State's a weird team to me. Like, sometimes they look so good, like when they killed Clemson. Other times they look so bad, like when they got beat up by Mississippi State. And I just don't really know what they are. And one thing that I do know is that UCLA can run the football really well. And I feel like the teams that NC State couldn't beat were ones that could run the ball reasonably well. I mean, outside of Mississippi State, it's a passing team. And I think that UCLA has some momentum right now because they realize that they're about to start getting some pushback from USC within the state, within the city of, LA and the state of California. And they retain Chip Kelly. I think that's going to give a lot of good momentum for them. Coming off a pretty good year, I think UCLA wants to show that it was a solid year, that they're on the uptick. I like UCLA to win this game.
Okay.
All right, Joe, speaking of Mississippi State, how about Texas Tech, who fired their coach before he actually had a season where they went to a bowl game, taking on Mississippi State and Mike Leach's boys that, as they say on SEC Rant, we don't even know if they're good. They're just crazy. You never know what Mississippi State's going to go out there and do week to week. What do you think? Do you think that Mike Leach finishes this one off with a bowl victory?
I do. I think Mississippi State will win. I think Will Rogers, with the exception of the Egg Bowl, I mean, he was really putting up crazy good numbers the last half of the season, broke school records set by Dak Prescott. And it's really interesting with this matchup, kind of an underrated component is the reunion of Mike Leach against Texas Tech, his former school. And they say they don't set up these matchups, but I mean, who's kidding ourselves? This is clearly a setup matchup, for that storyline on one factor. And so I think that Mississippi State right now will win this game. And I think that you'll see their offense look pretty good and maybe springboard them for next season.
That's a good point, Joe. I didn't even think about that. I feel like it's been so long since Mike Leach was at Texas Tech that I kind of forgot about that. So that is a really good storyline. And of course, we all know that the reason that Leach was fired at Texas Tech was, kind of bogus when you go back and think about it. Basically, it was that, one of the most legendary Texas players, Texas high school players of all time, and of course, who ended up being on SMU. James, his son, played in. I think there was some allegations that he had gotten locked in a closet for punishment or something, and he didn't like that because the son wasn't listening. And of course, Tim James, being the big wig he is, wanted to get Mike Leach fired at that point, and that's what he did. And, I mean, you can sit around and argue the different merits of it, but, if you want to watch the Junction Boys with Bear Bryant back in the days, I mean, that was child's play compared to what they did or what, these kind of things are. And I don't know. I always kind of thought that Mike Leach never should have gotten fired, but now he has the chance to get revenge. And I like Mississippi State also in that matchup.
All right.
All right, Joe, here's kind of an interesting one right here. Probably two teams that you would have expected to have better seasons than they did, and that's Minnesota taking on West Virginia. Minnesota kind of started improving towards the end of the season, but, they had a lot of high hopes to begin the year, and you were hoping that Row the Boat could definitely maybe make another Big Ten championship run. And West Virginia had such a solid defense and played people tight, they just didn't beat anybody. So who do you like in this one?
I like Minnesota. Didn't they win the Paul Bunyan Axe against Wisconsin to end
They
the year?
Yes,
so
they ended the year.
So I think there's a little bit of a wave of momentum for PJ Fleck in Minnesota. So I think they'll kind of carry that over and win this game. And you got to think about it. Minnesota's season really, was deflected and hurt when their running back got hurt, like the first game of the season. So they finally have, I think, recovered from that somewhat.
Yeah, that was a really sad thing when Ibrahim got hurt in the very first game against Ohio State. When I think Joe, by the time he got hurt, he had like 160 yards in 2.5 quarters against Ohio State. Now, of course, this Ohio State defense is not as great as some ideations of their older ones, but still, any running back getting 160 yards against any Ohio State defense is impressive. And that's what Ibrahim did. And another thing that's like a big wave of momentum for Minnesota, I've heard Ibrahim is going to come back for another year. So that's huge right there. And I think you're right. I mean, coming off a win over Wisconsin, who was probably the most improved team in America the second half of the season, big win for Minnesota and PJ Fleck. I like the momentum to continue. Row the boat. All right, Joe, next one. This is an interesting game right here. Virginia taking on SMU. I call this the We Lost Our Coach Bowl.
Yeah, I'm going to go, like I said earlier, I was going SEC over AAC with Auburn and Houston. Here, though, I'm going SMU. I think SMU will beat Virginia. I know Virginia won some games this year, but, this is not basketball. I feel like as a football program, I just don't trust Virginia as much, so I'm going SMU.
I agree, Joe. SMU had a really good year. They were undefeated for a long time, and a lot of people thought they were probably going to be taking on Cincinnati in the AAC championship game. But then, of course, when TCU opened up, it was all but a done deal that Sonny Dykes was going to go over there. And I think that caused a little bit of internal issues. But I got to say, I'm kind of excited to see what their new head coaching hire, Rhett Lashley, can do. Rhett Lashley, of course, was Auburn's offensive coordinator at the beginning of the Gus Bus's tenure. He was the offensive coordinator when Auburn played the national championship in 2013. I always thought he seemed like a really smart young guy who Gus didn't really let open his wings and fly a little bit. And I've been kind of watching Rhett Lashley's career from afar, so I hope he does well at SMU. And, with Virginia, Tony Elliott going there, I think that, I think Elliott's kind of lost a little bit. If you looked at Clemson's offense last year, not the best. And I know that neither one of these guys are coaching. I'm just talking about the trajectory of them. Mm-hmm. And I think I like SMU in this game too, because I think the AAC is a better conference than the ACC right now.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Joe, sticking with the ACC, now we're talking Virginia Tech taking on an old ACC opponent who is now a Big Ten member when it's so confusing, Maryland. Virginia Tech and Maryland. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one because you feel like both programs were kind of up and down, and Justin Fuente was fired for Virginia Tech. And so, I don't know what to think about them right now. I do like the Elliott hire. Or I guess, is Elliott at Virginia or Virginia Tech next year?
Elliott's going to be at Virginia. Virginia Tech hired Brent Pry, the defensive coordinator from Penn State.
That's right. Okay. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to decide like who has the momentum in this matchup, because Maryland, I feel like I saw them lose pretty bad in a few games this year. At the end of the day, I'm going to go with I think I'll go with Maryland. But I don't feel it's kind of a coin flip for me.
Joe also took Maryland in this only because I believe it's been something like 8 years since Maryland made a bowl game. They have Taulia Tagovailoa, who's a very electric quarterback. I mean, he's not as good as Tua was in college, but he does a lot with what he has, and he's really fun to watch. And I kind of think that Maryland's going to have more motivation in this one to win their first bowl game in a while. And I think Taulia is going to light up the scoreboard against Virginia Tech on this one.
Okay, I can see that.
All right, Joe, here's another one. I called the Virginia and SMU game the no head coach bowl. I'm calling this one we're in what bowl again? And that's Clemson and Iowa State taking on each other in the Cheez-It Bowl. Talk about how disappointed both of these fan bases and programs are based on what they began the season with. I mean, both of these were programs who probably expected to make the college football playoff before the season started, and now they're playing in the Cheez-It Bowl. So who do you like between Clemson, who no longer has any coordinators, and Iowa State, who basically had their coach say, I don't look at the wins and losses at the end of the season. I just want to make sure that our guys are having fun. It was a very weird sentence thing that was said by Iowa State's coach Matt Campbell, who was such a big name in the coaching market just last year. And now suddenly he's saying he's just excited when his kids have a good time and he doesn't care about winning and losing. So really weird mindsets for both of these programs right now. Who do you like between Clemson and Iowa State?
It's another tough one to predict because I think coming into the season, a lot of people would not have been surprised these two teams had faced off in the playoff or New Year's Six bowl, but nobody saw them, facing off in a bowl like this of this caliber. Because I don't think Clemson's been in a non-New Year's Six or playoff bowl since 2014. Last 6 or 7 years, they've been in the playoffs seemingly every year. So this is new territory for them. On the Iowa State side, you have Breece Hall and Brock Purdy, unless somebody opts out. That's something to pay attention to, especially with Breece Hall. He might opt out at running back. I'm going to probably surprise you. I'm going to go Clemson here, and here's the reason. I feel like Clemson's going to win this game with Sweeney, and even though, they're searching for new coordinators, I feel like Clemson wants to get to 10-3, and I think that would allow the program to say, look, we're not completely gone. Like everybody's kind of forgotten about us, but we get to 10-3, we could get a wave of momentum for 2022.
Okay. Joe, I got Iowa State in this one. I think that this is probably going to be Brock Purdy's last game. I think he's going to play well. Breece Hall might have trouble if he does play going against this Clemson defense, but I see a Clemson team that is no longer has their defensive coordinator, no longer has their offensive coordinator. And yes, they just got fresh off of just another beatdown of South Carolina, which is a series they've dominated. But I kind of think that the new champions of life and Matt Campbell's Cyclones are going to get the job done and win this one.
It won't be the last game for that guy for Clemson that's been there for 7 years. The defensive player,
Skalski. Yeah. It'll be Skalski's last game. Skalski is quite the player. And we'll see what happens when he gets to the pros, and hopefully he doesn't take out more people like he has, because it's not going to go as well for him in the pros when he does that.
Right.
All right, Joe, speaking of, a game that probably you would have thought you would have seen in a higher level matchup, this is also the second we don't have a coach bowl, and this is Oregon versus Oklahoma. Talk about a very interesting game where you had you had coaches basically leaving the dead of the night to go to other programs. Lincoln Riley with his infamous, I am not going to be LSU's head coach. By the way, I was going to be USC's head coach. And then he leaves the next day. And then, of course, Mario Cristobal leaving what is a very established program in Oregon to go home to Miami. I don't really blame Mario Cristobal. Like I said, I think on the last show, he's got an ailing mother that's sick in Miami. He's from there. I think that decision makes a lot of sense to me, and I don't think anybody should put anything past him. Lincoln Riley, I mean, it makes sense to me as well, but the way he did it, I think you could argue was kind of ridiculous. So, who do you like in this one with both of these programs? They have new head coaches, both defensive coordinators. Dan Lanning is going to be the head coach at Oregon. Now, Brent Venable is going to be the head coach at Oklahoma. Who do you like in this one, Joe?
Yeah, this is one of the ones I circled when the Bulls came out a week or so ago is like one of the most fascinating New Year's Six games because of the programs involved in the Alamo Bowl of all places. I'm going to go with Oklahoma, and here's the main reason. Out of the two coaching hires, I feel like the Brett Venables was a better hire, and I feel like getting Jeff Lebby as your offensive coordinator is better. And I know they're not coaching in this game, but I think there's more of a security blanket and the confidence surrounding Oklahoma's program right now, aside from Oregon, where I'm just not really sure, especially coming off that, just another demolishing performance, losing to Utah the way they did in the Pac-12 championship game. I just think there's less momentum for Oregon. Again, I said earlier, I don't really trust the Pac-12, so I'm going with Oklahoma to win this game.
Yeah, Joe, I agree with you on this. I think Oklahoma made a very good head coaching hire in getting Brett Venables, getting Jeff Lebby in as a really awesome offensive coordinator. They finished well on the recruiting trail. I saw they had a number 10 class. Nothing wrong with that. And you're right. I'm worried about the state of Oregon right now. They look like they're weak. They're reeling. What happened? The Utah twice to end the season. Cristobal leaving from Miami, even with the reasons we said, it still is a bad look for him. And I kind of feel like with Lincoln Riley coming into the Pac-12 with what Brian Kelly, what Chip Kelly's doing at UCLA, I think next year is going to be a year where people are going to be taking some gut punches on Oregon. I think that they're in trouble right now. So I also like Oklahoma in this game.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. The Battle of the Carolinas in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Doesn't that just sound like such an appetizing bowl game to you? North Carolina taking on South Carolina. We've been giving so much love to Shane Beamer. Does he get even more love from you right here, Joe, with a pick in this bowl game?
Yeah, it's so hard to say because a couple of weeks ago, I think I definitely take UNC with Sam Howell to win this game because UNC is the better offense, I would think. But there's something about, like, right now what we've seen with South Carolina getting Spencer Rattler and the recruiting class being better than expected. And then also just kind of the up and down tendencies of North Carolina all year. Like, I just don't trust this team. Like, early on, like the second week of the season, they were losing, I think, to Virginia Tech. And, I've told you how I just don't really trust Sam Howell being a quarterback prospect at the next level. Always kind of felt like he's overrated. And so for some reason, due to that kind of unpredictable topsy-turvy nature of UNC, I kind of feel like South Carolina may actually win this game.
All right, Joe. I actually am taking UNC in this one, and I'll tell you why, because of how topsy-turvy they are. I feel like you're right. North Carolina, some weeks they're awesome. They look like a top 10 team, and other weeks they're just terrible. They lose to Virginia Tech at home, or they lose to Virginia Tech on the road. But when they play good teams, they tend to try to elevate themselves. They beat a Wake Forest team and with a great run in the end. They beat Florida State. And I kind of think that this being Sam Howell's last game, he's had such a rough year. I kind of have this belief that when he gets to play an SEC team, especially an SEC team that's near the footprint to where he plays at, I think he's going to play well. And I like North Carolina and Mac Brown to get this win right here.
Okay.
All right, Joe, this is a fascinating game to me. And it's probably with two of the most surprising teams in America. And that is, of course, Tennessee taking on the Spoiler Makers of Purdue. I think this is going to be a great bowl game right here in the Music City Bowl. So we got Tennessee returning to a bowl game in what I think was a very good first season by Josh Heupel. And then, of course, Purdue, fresh off top two wins over Iowa and Michigan State. Who do you got between Tennessee and the Spoiler Makers?
I'm going Tennessee. I think that a lot of times in these SEC Big Ten games, it's safer to pick the SEC. And then also with the game being in Tennessee and Nashville, I think Tennessee's going to have a huge crowd there. And I think that's going to make a difference too.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. Do you think that Purdue is ready to get golf balls thrown at them if they win?
They better be prepared.
I'm actually going to take Purdue on this. I think Purdue has played really well against the upper level teams they've played this year. And I think they're going to be a lot of motivation. And the big motivation that I see is the last time that Purdue took on an SEC team in a bowl game was when Auburn beat them 66-7. And it was really an embarrassing look. It was in the same bowl game, the Music City Bowl a couple years ago. And Auburn unleashed a lot of frustration on Purdue after a rough season. And I kind of think that Purdue, with a team that's gone toe-to-toe with some very good football teams, is going to find a way to beat a Tennessee team who's just not quite there yet.
Okay.
All right, Joe, this is another one of the best games, and this is actually a New Year's Six game. These are two teams that came out of nowhere to have really excellent seasons. One of them won the ACC. The other one was in the Big Ten race until the very end. And we're talking Michigan State and Mel Tucker taking on Pittsburgh and Kenny Pickett. Who do you like in this one?
I'm going Pittsburgh. I think, the big storyline is going to be Kenneth Walker running back, and you have Kenny Pickett at quarterback, two of the most exciting players in the country. I think Kenny Pickett those out to improve his draft stock, to set himself apart as maybe the number one quarterback prospect in this draft. And I think that while Michigan State, lost a couple of games, I think that they had national title hopes most of this season. And I think they're a little bit more disappointed to be here compared to a Pittsburgh program that won the ACC. And I think they're celebrating this appearance a little bit more. And so I think that galvanizes them, and Kenny Pickett and the great wide receivers that he have, I think they're going to light it up.
Joe, I'm completely with you on this. I think Pittsburgh is very excited about their season, coming off a big-time win in the ACC championship game. And I think you're right. I think Pickett is out to show that he should be the number one overall pick, number one quarterback out there. And you're right. I don't know where the level of motivation is in Michigan State. But one more factor in particular that really makes me like Pittsburgh in this is Michigan State has one of the worst pass defenses in all of college football. And I think Kenny Pickett is going to eat them alive. He might throw for over 400 yards in this game. And that's the main reason I like Pitt in this one.
That's a good point.
All right, Joe, here's a game of teams that, at times look so good and other times look so bad. And at the end, you're just wondering, where are they going next? And this is going to be the Las Vegas Bowl between Wisconsin and Arizona State. Who do you like in this one?
I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I think they're going to be kind of motivated losing that Paul Bunyan's axe game to Minnesota. And I think they'll bounce back and defeat Arizona State.
Joe, this is one of my blowout city games. I think Wisconsin is going to beat the brakes off of Arizona State in this one. I like them big. In my bowl pool, which you rank confidence points based on, how confident you are, Wisconsin was my number one confidence pick. I had them at 25 on this. I think Wisconsin is a team that at times is a top 5 program this year. Like, they can be absolutely excellent. It's just which Wisconsin team shows up. But I think you're right. Fresh off a beatdown from the Golden Gophers, I think they're going to play great in this one. I think their defense is going to show them something they don't see in the Pac-12, and I like Wisconsin to roll in this one.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, now we're getting down to some of the really exciting ones. We got a college football playoff semifinal, Michigan and Georgia. Who do you got?
I'm going Georgia. I think that I actually go on record. I feel like Georgia's going to win the national title. And I think that it starts with beating Michigan. What's that?
Say what? Did you watch that SEC championship game?
No, I think so. I think that's going to be – I don't think Bama can beat them twice. I think pretty much the team that won that game, the loser, is going to win the rematch if that happens, which it should. So I think that Georgia beats Michigan. I think it will be obviously the better of the two playoff games. I think it will come right down to the wire. But I think that you will see Georgia bounce back and win this game.
All right, Joe. I'm going to take Michigan in this one. I said it earlier. I think this Georgia team is lost right now. I think they had so much riding on that game against Alabama. They knew they needed to take them out then. Alabama was dead in the water after a very subpar performance against Auburn, and Georgia had 0 sacks. they couldn't even get to Bryce Young, and they threw a pick six. I mean, they were awful in that game. And I look at Michigan, they're probably maybe the most confident team in America right now. And not only did they beat the brakes off of Ohio State, they came back and absolutely dominated Iowa, which is not a great football team, which is a very good defense. And I think that this is Harbaugh's time. And I think Michigan is going to make it to the national championship game. And I think Kirby is going to leave a lot of people, including our tortured Georgia friend Kyle, upset once again at Georgia, thinking about what could have been.
Yeah, and again, I may surprise people with the pick because I know what happened in the SEC championship game. But I'll just say it now. I think that may turn out to be the best thing that could have happened to Georgia.
That's right. All right, Joe, Alabama and Cincinnati.
I mean, I think it's going to be closer than people expect. Like, I do think Cincinnati will hang around in that first half. I mean, Cincinnati is a good team. They have an SEC caliber running back in Ford. Ritter's an experienced senior quarterback. So I think they keep it close to the first two quarters. But at the end of the day, Alabama's going to pull through in the second half. I think Alabama wins by 15 to 20 points.
Okay. Joe, on this bowl pool, I have Cincinnati selected, but there's a reason behind that. I call it it's a hedge pick because everybody's going to put a lot of points in Alabama. And so I put like 1 point on Cincinnati. So on the off chance that Cincinnati did win, I can flip the field. But I'm actually picking Alabama in this one in like my actual pick. So we'll note to that. I think Alabama probably wins by 10 points. I think Cincinnati's going to hang for a really long time. And then they're going to play Alabama tough. And just at the end, I just think that Bryce Young's going to make the plays that matter. Even without Mechie, I still think Jameson Williams is going to be a matchup nightmare for Cincinnati. And I'm aware that Cincinnati has a probable first-round draft pick at cornerback. And, of course, they have a former Alabama running back in Ford that's doing great things. And, of course, Desmond Ridder. But I do think that Alabama ultimately is going to be a little more talented than with them and get the win.
Yeah, but I think you make a good point. I think like it could be a 10-point game. A lot of people were giving Cincinnati no chance. I think that's ridiculous.
I don't say no chance, Joe. I mean, I'll say this. I'm not going to be like floored if Cincinnati wins this game. I think they could win this game because we've seen this Alabama team. They're so Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, Auburn was not a great football team this year. They were a average to good football team. Sometimes they were good. A lot of times they were average, and they should have gotten beat by 10-plus points by Auburn. In all honesty, in that game.
Right.
They should have lost to Florida. They really should have lost to LSU. I mean, they wanted to lose that game to LSU. LSU just didn't want to win it, you know. And so, I mean, if that team shows up and Cincinnati plays their A game, they could have a real chance.
Yeah, and Cincinnati's playing, for more than just themselves. They're playing for all the teams in the past that have been left out, of these big playoff games.
That's why they're carrying the banner for all the group of 5 teams. So I think Cincinnati is going to play a really great game, and it's just which Alabama team shows up. If the Alabama team that played Georgia shows up, then Cincinnati still might lose by 17 to 24. But if it's the Bama team that played Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, and LSU, then Cincinnati can win.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Joe. Moving on to Wake Forest taking on Texas A&M. Wake Forest off a really great year where they, were in the thoughts of a possible college football playoff berth, an ACC championship for a while, and then Texas A&M, who kind of like Alabama, sometimes is great and other times loses to bad football teams.
I'm going to go with Texas A&M. Like, Wake Forest is a really dynamic offense. Sam Hartman is a good quarterback, but I just don't have a whole lot of trust in Wake's defense. Also think that A&M's defense can slow down Hartman and Wake Forest enough to be able to pull this off for the Aggies.
I'm going to tell you, Wake Forest has not seen a defense that's anything like what Texas A&M has. A&M has one of the best defenses in America. And while Wake Forest does have a very dynamic offense, I think that they're not going to score very many points at all. And I think A&M is going to really show them what the SEC is all about with a really great defense. And I also think that Spiller and A-Chain are going to just run all over Wake Forest. I like A&M. That's my second highest confidence pick right there. So I also like A&M a lot.
Okay.
All right, Joe, a very interesting game. This is also the third we don't have a coach bowl. Washington State taking on Miami. Very different reasons why they don't have coaches. Who do you like in this one?
I like Washington State. That's one Pac-12 team I think I will pick because I always feel like their offenses are pretty good. They had some moments this year. They looked really good in the Apple Cup game when they ended, a 7 or 8 game losing streak to Washington. And I think that they'll carry that over and beat Miami.
Yeah, Joe, I also like Washington State in this. The interim coach that took over from Rolovich after getting fired for not getting the COVID vaccine did a great job. I mean, I think they went 5-3 when he was there. Beat some really good teams. I think they beat Stanford and they beat I think it was Arizona State and UCLA were teams that they beat. And so they had some good wins. And I think this Miami team is a shell of itself. Who knows if Derek King's going to even play? No one knows what's really going on with them. And I think that Cristobal's got his work cut out for him when he goes there. So I like Washington State in this one also. Okay. All right, Joe, here's one. Central Michigan taking on Harson's old team, Boise State.
I mean, that's kind of a tough one to pick. I mean, Boise State has some up and down moments this year. I feel like, though, as a program, like as a whole, Boise State's usually better. And so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt over Central Michigan.
Yeah, Joe, I got Boise State on this one as well. I just think that there's going to be a lot more talent right there. I know that Central Michigan has had some years, and of course they did have Antonio Brown, but Boise State just has been such a solid foundation, and Harsin had it for a long time, and they were always good there. So, there's still some good talent there. So I like Boise State also.
Okay.
All right, Joe, this is, I think, a very fascinating game right here. And you went definitely different sides of the owl motivation, but also the team that you would think to have a lack of motivation just had a great signing day. And it seems like there's a lot of things moving forward that are well. Arkansas taking on Penn State in the Outback Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough one. I will say this. I feel like KJ Jefferson really showed some things this year. And it wouldn't surprise me, if he comes out next year and just has really an outstanding season in the SEC. A lot of people compare him to some Cam Newton attributes with his style of play. I'm going to say that Arkansas wins this game.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me say this, Joe. You're going way against me on this because Penn State was one of my highest confidence picks in this one. I think that Sean Clifford returning for his 6th year is a real boost to this program. I think Clifford's finally getting healthy. I think he's going to have a great game. You're going to see Javon, you see Javon, wide receiver, in his last game, probably as a Penn State Indy line. I think he's going to ball out. Arkansas's defense is kind of falling apart. And another thing, too, is Penn State has a really good defense that I think is going to lock down Arkansas. We saw what happened when they played good defenses a la Auburn and, some of these other ones they took on, Texas A&M. Actually, they beat Texas A&M, but they did they struggled against some of the better defenses they played. And I think this Penn State team is going to win. And I kind of like Penn State pretty big in this one, to be honest. I think Arkansas really topped out on where they were going to go this year.
Well, here's what I'll say about Arkansas. I really think, like I said, with KJ Jefferson, I think next year he could be the second best quarterback in the SEC coming back outside of Bryce Young.
Really? Man, big KJ fan. He is from Mississippi, Sardis.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I like that. I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be an interesting game, but I definitely like Penn State in that one. Here's another good Big Ten SEC matchup. Iowa taking on Kentucky.
I like Kentucky. I know Iowa made it to the Big Ten championship game, but I don't trust their offense. And don't get me wrong, Kentucky doesn't have a great offense, but they're better, and it's also an SEC defense.
Yeah, Joe, I like Kentucky in this. I got them pretty high. The biggest problem with Iowa is their offense is pathetic. I mean, they have Goodson is a good running back, but their quarterback, Petras, is awful. The passing game is non-existent. Kentucky, while not the best version of Stoops' team, they did finish the season pretty good, and I think their quarterback is serviceable. I mean, Levis is kind of like a poor man's Cam Newton. He can't throw it as good, but he is tough. He gets a lot of yards running, and I think that their defense is going to completely shut out Iowa, and I like Kentucky in this one probably by 10 to 17 points.
Okay.
All right, Joe, this is another really interesting game right here because these are both programs that were just on the precipice of making the college football playoff and didn't. Notre Dame taking on Oklahoma State.
I'm going with Notre Dame, and here's the reason why. I feel like Oklahoma State's probably lost a lot of sleep at night thinking they easily could have been in the playoff. Because here's the thing. I really would not put it past the committee. If Oklahoma State beats Baylor and gets that touchdown in and doesn't have the goal line stop, I think they may get an in over Cincinnati. Like, I really think the committee would have taken a Power 5 conference champion with one loss over Cincinnati. And maybe they wouldn't, but I think that that's resulted in a lot of sleepless nights for Oklahoma State when they had just a golden opportunity. I think Notre Dame's going to be more motivated. I think they're going to be more energized with Marcus Freeman. The players love him as the head coach, and I think Notre Dame wins this game.
All right, Joe, I got Oklahoma State to win this one. I think that their defense is going to be a shutdown what is a very pedestrian Notre Dame offense. And while it does seem like there's a lot of motivation moving forward and Freeman's doing a lot of stuff, I still think that's going to affect them a little bit. And I like Oklahoma State on the strength of their defense and what could be a very ugly 10-9 type game to gut it out.
Okay.
All right, Joe, down to the last two. Ohio State taking on Utah.
I'm going with Ohio State. Like, I love Utah as a program. Like, I've been a big Kyle Whittingham fan for a long time. I'm still surprised that he's never left to take a better job. And I love the fact that it's kind of a different team out of the Pac-12 playing in the Rose Bowl this year, not just kind of the same old story of like an Oregon, a Stanford, or a USC. But at the end of the day, I think that C.J. Stroud and Ohio State are really, motivated. Like I've talked about, kind of motivation has been kind of a theme behind a lot of my bowl picks. But I think that Stroud is a prolific passer, and I think that he is really motivated by the loss to Michigan, the way they lost that game, just being dominated in the trenches. And I think that Ryan Day and this team is going to really play well in the Rose Bowl.
Well, Joe, how many other players do you think opt out? Do you think you see Olave? Do you think you see Garrett Wilson? Do you think you see Jackson Smith and Jigbo? Do you think these guys play? I mean, that's the question that I have with Ohio State. And that's why I'm actually taking Utah on this one. I think Utah is going to pull a big upset. And, we saw what they did to Oregon. They absolutely obliterated them. The last half of the season, no one was even close to beating Utah. I think they're going to be so excited to play there. And I don't think Ohio State could care less about this game, to be honest. They're not in the college football playoff. Everyone was hearing about they were the team that was going to beat Georgia. And now they're playing a Utah team, which we've seen what Utah does to teams that are not motivated in big-time bowl games, a la Alabama in the Sugar Bowl twice. And that's what Utah does. And I'll say this. They're playing for more than just themselves. You could see it when they played Oregon. They had their two players on their team that were both murdered that wear the same color. And it's just the same number. And it's just been such a powerful story about this Utah team that I think is going to be a movie one day. And I think that the way you finish that movie and write a great script is to go out and beat the Ohio State University. And I see it. Give me that money, Disney.
It'd certainly be a great story. This would be their best team probably since that 12-0 team that beat Bama in the Sugar Bowl.
That's right. So I'm going for the story, and I'm going for the Utes. All right, Joe, the last one. Our Ole Miss Rebels taking on Baylor. Who do you like in the Sugar Bowl?
I think Ole Miss will win, objectively speaking. And the main reason is I just think that there's a lot of cohesiveness and chemistry within the Ole Miss team right now. I think it's just kind of a special team with the camaraderie they have in the locker room. And I think that Baylor will be in for kind of being hit by a buzzsaw here. I think that everything kind of comes together for Ole Miss. They are motivated to get that 11th win to go 11-2. And I think that we'll finish the night kind of kicking ourselves as Ole Miss fans, feeling like, they easily could be in the playoff.
I think so too, Joe. I think this is going to be a very motivated Ole Miss team to get the most wins in program history. I think Baylor is still riding high off their improbable win over Oklahoma State that they shouldn't have had. This is going to be Matt Corral's last game. There's still a lot of, there's still a high in Ole Miss and a happiness that's moving forward after Lane Kiffin's extension and holding them off from multiple other suitors. I like Ole Miss in this one, and probably big. I think Ole Miss wins by a couple scores.
And here's another statistic I'll throw out. I read this week that Ole Miss has the best winning percentage of any college football program in history in bowl games.
That was good. I'm glad you cleared that last one up because I highly disagree with that statement right there. But yes, in bowl games, Ole Miss does tend to do pretty well in bowl games.
The best winning percentage ever in bowl games.
How about that? What's that percentage, Joe? Do you know it?
I'm not sure. I would guess like over 700, but I'm not sure.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I do. The only game I can think of that Ole Miss lost was that one against TCU, and that probably accounts for about 10 losses when you look at what happened in that game. But you're right. I mean, it tends to be that Ole Miss does do very well in bowl games. So, well, hotty toddy on that one. And with that being said, we hope that Ole Miss further strengthens their lead on the all-time winning percentage of bowl games, and that you listen to our show next week as we break down what happens in all these bowl games when we get back from the Christmas break. Catch all of our old episodes on Spotify. You can listen to them. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.